Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Riches. Matthew Grove is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Humberside. He holds a new office created in 2012, one of 41 elected commissioners in England and Wales, replacing the old police authorities. Mr Grove stood as a Conservative and narrowly won election against Lord Prescott, John Prescott, former Labour Deputy Prime Minister. These first elections of police commissioners attracted a low turnout of only about 15.1% nationally. It should be emphasised that the position is one of democratic oversight rather than operational command. Police and crime commissioners are not professional police officers. Matthew Grove, welcome.
Good afternoon, Hugh.
Thank you for being here. First question is about the precept that you're asking for. You've asked for a 1.99% increase in the police precept going on to everybody in Humberside's council tax. The Police and Crime panel voted against that, but they didn't get the two-thirds majority necessary to overturn your decision. Why have you chosen to increase the precept?
It is a modest increase that I'm asking for. For most people, we're talking about 5 pence per week. I've inherited a force that is currently spending more than it receives in income. It's already reduced costs by about £28 million. I have another £32 million worth of savings to find. Now, the public consistently tell me one thing when I meet them. They say, Matthew, protect policing. It's important to us. It needs to be looked after. I've reached a point where I'm confident that I can save that £30 million and still maintain a robust, effective policing service. But just before Christmas, there was a further top slicing of our budgets that took another £1.5 million out of the money available for local policing. That has reached a point where I cannot look my residents in the eye, the victims of crime in the eye, and say, I am confident I can maintain an adequate policing service for you at that level of funding. And that is why I took the view that the public supported an increase, and I went out and tested it with independent market research by a company called SMSR, and they were able to confirm what I had heard with my own ears through the previous year, which is 75% of the public said they would accept a modest increase. Only 18% said they wouldn't. And that is why I presented that to the panel. You
have alternatives, though. You do have reserves. There are other ways of taking money from central government. The increase isn't the only way you had of generating income.
No, there isn't any additional funding available from central government. I can bid for grants, and I indeed did bid for £500,000 I've secured to invest in mobile technology. But the only money that is available
but
is...
But that £500,000 wasn't dependent on your rising the precept and getting an extra revenue from the precept.
No, it wasn't.
You've got that £500,000 anyway.
It's an investment that the government is handing to me to improve the efficiency of policing. The reserves we have don't actually exist in reality. There's no bank account with money in it. It's access to be able to borrow money against buildings that we already have. The police authorities spent the cash reserves on buildings. So what we're talking about is borrowing money today to pay for policing today, which will have to be paid back by our children and probably our grandchildren. I am not willing to do that. We have reserves, those reserves or access to money which is to be invested to allow us to move from the position we are now, which is a police service that's costing more to run than we are receiving in income, to where we can balance the budget. It's a real challenge, but it's something that I'm confident we can do. But we're reaching a point you can only squeeze so much out of a sponge. Well, I don't think I can look people in the eye without this increase and say I am confident I can ensure you're properly protected with the money we have available.
You can only squeeze so much out of the council taxpayer as well. There are all sorts of other calls on that public money, and there are all sorts of other things that people would rather do than pay council tax with the money that they earn, their value. May I just put a point made by David Rudd, who's the chairman of the Crime and Police panel. If he, that is you, if he freezes it, it would have to take £5.81 million out of reserves to balance the books. If he increases the precept by 2%, 1.9%, he'll have to take £5.464 million out of reserves. It's only a difference of £349,000.
Unfortunately, Councillor Rudd doesn't understand local authority funding. The government is offering a 1% grant, equivalent to 1% of council tax if I freeze, but it's for 2 years. So basically, I'm taking money today, but in 2 years that money will disappear. So I'm putting at risk the future of policing, the future of policing and protecting the public of this area. For what? The public are telling me, Matthew, your top priority for us is protect our policing. It is one of the most vital services. I am doing what they are asking me. I'm making those hard decisions. Would it affect policing today or tomorrow if I don't increase the precept? No.
If I can just put a quotation to you from David Rudd, the chairman of the police and crime panel. If he freezes it, as if you freeze it, he'd have to take £5.81 million out of reserves to balance the books. If he increased the precept by 2%, he'll have to take £5.464 million out of reserves. This is only a difference of £349,000. Surely you can cover a difference of £349,000 without raising the precept.
Councillor Rudd misunderstands the basis of local government finance. If I were to freeze this year, over the 5-year medium to financial term, it would be an additional £2.2 million lost from reserves. This basically means substantially fewer police officers will be on the street. I am not willing to do that because the public are quite clear to me. They say, Matthew, protect our policing. We want a visible policing presence maintained. We want to be properly protected in our homes, and that's why I'm proposing an increase.
To talk about the results of that policing, figures came out recently for the period from April to October last year. The difference between the number of investigations made by the Humberside Police Force and the number of actions taken as a consequence of those investigations, either judicial actions, cautions, community resolutions, and perhaps you can tell me what they are. But there were 5,744 investigations, of which only 1,617 had a result. All the others were letters sent to the victims saying, I'm afraid we can take no further action here and these are the reasons why. That's, what, a little more than 1 in 5 police investigations catch their man.
We have to be very, very careful with figures, otherwise we end up with perverse incentives and suddenly, as we've seen in other parts of the country, crimes don't even get recorded. In Humberside, I'm content that the force is very ethical and records crimes accurately. Not every crime can be solved, not immediately. If a vehicle is stolen and disappears, there is a space where the vehicle once was. If the vehicle can't be found, if it's burnt out, it may well be there's no evidence, no physical evidence to allow a prosecution. On other occasions, the suspect can be identified and is probably known, but there is insufficient evidence to actually bring a successful prosecution. Because unfortunately the judicial process assumes innocence and guilt has to be proven beyond all reasonable doubt. And it is very difficult and very expensive to bring a successful case. Therefore, not every case can be prosecuted.
Well, it's not unfortunate that we must be proven beyond reasonable doubt to be guilty before a jury of our peers or a magistrate before we can be proven. Well, that's the definition of a free country, isn't it? I mean, that you wouldn't have it any other way, I take it.
Absolutely not. But the cost of that, if you like, is that there are occasions where the likely perpetrator is identified to the point where there is no point in seeking to further inquire whether anybody else has done it. We've seen this through history, haven't we? But at that point, there is insufficient evidence at that time to allow a prosecution to be brought. But prosecutions can be brought at a later date, and very often are.
Well, what about, I mean, if you had more resources, or if you applied those resources differently, could you hope for perhaps fewer convictions, but convictions for more serious crimes? I mean, presumably you invest more in murder investigations than you do in shoplifting.
Absolutely, but actually what I really want to do is to shift policing back to where its first priority should be, which is the prevention of crime. I don't want to wait until we have victims whose lives are changed forever. We've got to do more to prevent crimes from happening, and that's where I'm pushing the force to do more work, and that's why we need that visible policing presence out there, deterring crimes from happening in the first place.
We'll come to that visible policing presence after this short break. Matthew Grove, thank you very much for talking to us. We must stop there. Please join us again in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I'm talking to Matthew Grove, Police and Crime Commissioner for Humberside. Commissioner, you were just talking about the importance of visible policing and the fact that that's what people want. People feel more secure and safe on the streets and in their homes when they can see bobbies on the beat. Does it really prevent crime?
Yes, it does. It quite clearly does, providing it's targeted in the right locations. But visibility isn't just about a physical police presence. It's about building those links between the police service and the public. It's about having communication links that are not just about police officers standing in the street and walking down the street. It's about having Facebook, Twitter. You know, young people want to connect with the police by communicating online. Why don't we do more of this? And that's what we're starting to do.
How does that help the detection of crime? I mean, it's of course a good idea for the police to have a relationship with the community that they're policing by consent and all that, but just by being visible, whether it's by being accessed through Facebook or other digital media, or by walking the beat, or by having cars parked on corners, that's not going to catch the felons, that's not going to catch the villains. Being charming is not the main job of the police.
No, it does, because it builds that big team. You know, we've got 900,000 residents in northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire who are there to work with the force, who can provide information, who can be the eyes and the ears. At the moment, we have some excellent neighbourhood watch schemes that draw in a certain group of people. But actually, we want a much bigger neighbourhood watch, don't we? We want all of us to feel that we have that direct connection with our local neighbourhood policing team, so that we can tell them things that they need, you know, when it's happening. Farm Watch is a great example of this. You know, here in northern Lincolnshire, we've got some incredible Farm Watch schemes where the community is fighting back. I've met members of the Farm Watch scheme where they felt they couldn't leave their farms, they couldn't leave their rural homes because they feared what would happen. By joining together,
frightened of walking around in the countryside than they were the dark streets of Hull or Scunthorpe or Grimsby.
No, serious crimes take place in rural communities. You know, we see thefts of fuel, we see thefts of machinery, of livestock, and farmers out there feel they are absolutely being targeted. Farm Watch has allowed them to join together and fight back, and they are in direct communication with the police through text messaging, and they've suddenly turned the tables, and they are now hunting those criminals that are coming out to prey on them. They've completely turned the tables on them, and that's what I want to see more of that.
Well, if there is such a fear of crime in the mean lanes of Lincolnshire and Yorkshire, you're closing down rural police stations.
Absolutely not. Certainly I'm not. What I'm concerned about is we've seen how our police officers have withdrawn from being out in the community, and they spend too much of their time in larger stations, mainly in towns. I want them to get back out where they need to be, on patrol. Why they keep being drawn back into police stations, a lot of it is the technology. So that's why I'm investing in mobile technology that means they can spend up to 2 hours more on patrol, preventing crimes from happening.
But they're still then returning to fewer police stations in the countryside.
No, because what we're doing is we're going to open more police access points. What we're going to have is small police stations. Hopefully in almost every major village we'll have one. At the moment, very few rural villages have any police presence at all, permanent. We want to open police access points in shared buildings, whether it be libraries, parish council offices.
And how often will they be manned?
We want them to be manned pretty well all the time, but in partnership with perhaps the parish council. It might be the parish council clerk, who is there working anyway, is that access point to the police service. And we want our PCSOs and our rural police officers to be able to work out of those locations, so they don't have to go to a town 15 miles away to start their work. They go straight to where they're needed, which is out to those communities that need their protection.
Perhaps in the towns more than in the countryside, we've got a lot of drinkers in the Humberside area. In your election campaign, you spoke of setting up what were characterised as drunk tanks. How's that going?
It's a big challenge. My manifesto pledges, I think I made 19 manifesto pledges. Every one of them has been put into my police and crime plan. Some of them are ambitious. They are not easy to bring about. Drunk tanks, or sobering centres as some people call them, I think there's an absolute need for them. I do believe that the public want to see irresponsible drunken louts face a consequence that lasts longer than the hangover. We have seen much of our most precious emergency services have been robbed away from us. That's casualty, ambulances, and our police service. We've got to do more to give a consequence to those irresponsible people so they change their behaviour.
You talk about irresponsibility, but there is, again, this is a free country, you see. There is no law presently, or no criminal law against being drunk. So there must be some other behaviour perhaps caused by the drunkenness that would then trigger custody in a drunk tank or a sobriety centre.
But there is a law of being drunk and incapable, and we see the consequences of that, because we see many young people who end up losing their lives because they're drunk and incapable. We see a lot of crime being driven not by drugs at the moment. Our biggest problem isn't drugs, it's actually drink. It's driving a lot of violent crime. We have a high rate of violence in this area, and we've got to do more to tackle what is causing it, what is driving it, and drink is a big issue. Now,
well, then what's making them drink? I mean, these young people. Why are they boozing? Why are they?
Well, it's become a cultural norm, hasn't it? Increasing a minority of young people believe, and not just young people, a minority group of people believe, to go out and have a good time, you've got to get drunk. We don't seem to have a drinking culture in this country so much anymore. We seem to have a drunkenness culture, and we need to tackle it head on.
Various parts of the police area for which you're responsible, where that drinking culture is quite a significant part of the economy. There are sort of holiday towns and resorts and market town centres and large city centres where there are all sorts of businesses that depend on selling booze.
Absolutely. A drinking culture is healthy. A drunkenness culture isn't. I think a lot of people are deterred from going out into some towns, into the nighttime economy, because of what they will be confronted with. That's why I applaud the purple flag status that's been awarded to Hull City. That's why I went out and said Hull is now a very safe place to come out and enjoy yourselves. Whatever age you are, it's a safe place to be. But not every town is like that. You know, I went out in Grimsby with A.A. Gill, and quite shocking what is happening out there.
Well, he was clearly shocked.
He was very shocked.
Moving on just to a national issue, there are every time Parliament legislates to create a new criminal offence, that's more work for the police force. That's a new crime they have to police. There's presently a discussion of criminalising smoking in a car with a child. There's for a long time been a law against using a mobile phone while driving. These are all things that the police have to police, have to stop, have to catch. These are more jobs for them to do. Is there a point at which, if Parliament creates a new crime, it should offer you new police officers?
Well, at the same time they're creating new crimes, we are also seeing reductions in traditional crimes. Crime changes, it evolves.
Traditional crimes? That sounds rather quaint. What's a traditional crime?
There's a reduction in house burglaries, for instance, and that's partly because policing tackles house burglary very seriously, prioritise it.
But it's also white goods are no longer expensive and they're too big to get out of a window.
It's the commodity issue. The tellies are now screwed to the wall and they're too large to carry.
So instead of policing burglary, we should be policing smokers in cars.
We're seeing crime evolves, it changes, and actually one of the big issues at the moment is we're seeing huge increases in the amount of fraud, and we're seeing elderly and vulnerable people specifically being targeted.
Can I just get one final question? We're just running out of time. According to the Electoral Reform Society, it was about an average of 1.8 million was the cost of the elections for each police and crime commissioner last time round, and it only got a 15.1% turnout nationally.
We got 20%. We were the highest turnout in the country.
We're a much more enthusiastic set of Democrats in Humberside than most of the country. But that £1.8 million, that would go a long way to preventing the police from needing to set a higher preset in the future. Is it necessarily the case that having a commissioner is good value for money, when, never mind running the office and everything else, which I know is quite economical, but the election costs almost £2 million on the police budget? It
causes me huge concern. I would like to see that cost substantially reduced, and the obvious way to do that is to make the Police and Crime Commissioner elections on the same day as probably European elections or the general election, because the cost would go down from nearly £2 million to probably just £100,000 or more. Saturday I do street surgeries, and by focusing on the issues that are important to them and doing something about it.
In that case, we'll have to stop there. Commissioner, many thanks for joining us. Many thanks to Matthew Grove and to you for watching. I hope you'll join us again next time. Goodbye.